Taste the Daily.
Holidays nale, adi namma GT Holidays da. South India's #1 travel brand.
Hey, hi guys, welcome to Galatta Telugu. ఇదొక కొత్త ఇనిషియేటివ్ ఆఫ్ సార్ట్స్. వీఆర్ స్టార్టింగ్ అ వీక్లీ పాడ్కాస్ట్ లాగా. అంటే టు బి వెరీ ఆనెస్ట్, ఇంటర్వ్యూకి పాడ్కాస్ట్కి పెద్ద తేడా లేదు. ఒకటి బర్గర్ అయితే ఇంకొకటి శాండ్విచ్. రెండు కాన్వర్జేషన్స్, ఒకటి ఫ్రీ వీలింగ్గా, డీటెయిల్డ్గా, క్యాజువల్గా ఉంటే అది పాడ్కాస్ట్. దేన్నన్నా ఒక ఒక పర్పస్తో, లైక్ మూవీని ప్రమోట్ చేయాలని ఇంటెంట్తో వచ్చి చేస్తే అవి మనం చేసే మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ది ప్రమోషనల్ ఇంటర్వ్యూస్. ఇవేంటంటే ఫ్రీ వీలింగ్ కాన్వర్జేషన్స్. ఫస్ట్ వచ్చేసి ముకేష్ మంజునాథ్తో. హీస్ అ వెరీ గుడ్ ఫ్రెండ్, హీస్ అ ఫిల్మ్ క్రిటిక్ అండ్ హీ రీసెంట్లీ రోట్ అ బుక్ కాల్డ్ ది ఏజ్ ఆఫ్ హీరోస్. ఈ యొక్క పాడ్కాస్ట్ ఇంగ్లీష్లో ఉంటుంది బికాస్ బుక్ రాసిన ఇంటెన్షనే తెలుగు సినిమా అంటే పెద్దగా పరిచయం లేని వాళ్ళకి తెలుగు సినిమా అంటే ఏంటి, ఒక సెలబ్రేషన్ లాగా, ఒక పాజిటివ్ వేలో, ఒక ఏమంటారు మరీ క్రిటికల్గా కాకుండా సినిమా అంటే ఎంజాయ్ చేయాలి. బట్ ఆబ్వియస్లీ ఒక అకాడమిక్ పర్స్పెక్టివ్లో ఇది కరెక్ట్, ఇది రాంగ్, ఇవి ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ అని అడ్రస్ చేస్తూనే తను ఇంగ్లీష్లో రాశాడు బుక్. అండ్ ఆ బుక్ ఇంగ్లీష్లో ఉంది కాబట్టి మేము కూడా మా కాన్వర్జేషన్ కూడా వై తెలుగు సినిమా ఈ స్పెషల్ అట్లాంటివి డిస్కస్ చేసుకుంటూ చేసిన ఒక ఎపిసోడ్ కాబట్టి ఇది ఇంగ్లీష్లో ఉంటుంది. బట్ దాట్ బీయింగ్ సెడ్, నెక్స్ట్ అన్నీ తెలుగు ఇంగ్లీష్ మిక్స్ క్యాజువల్గా పెట్టుకుంటున్నాం కాబట్టి ఎవ్రీ సండే విల్ బి డ్రాపింగ్ 1 ఎపిసోడ్. మన రెగ్యులర్ ఇంటర్వ్యూస్ అవి వస్తూనే ఉంటాయి. వాటితో పాటు ఇవి ఫిల్మ్ రిలేటెడ్ కాన్వర్జేషన్సే, బట్ నాట్ ద యూజువల్ ఫిల్మ్ రిలేటెడ్ కాన్వర్జేషన్స్ లైక్ యాక్టర్స్ ఆఫ్ ఫిల్మ్ మేకర్స్ అట్లా కాదు. ఇంకొక యాంగిల్ నుంచి ఫిల్మ్ మేకింగ్ని చూడడానికి చేసి ఒక చిన్న అటెంప్ట్ ఇది. హోప్ యూ గైస్ లైక్ ఇట్. హియర్ ఇస్ ద ఫస్ట్ ఎపిసోడ్. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Galatta Telugu. My name is Ram Venkat Srikar. So this is kind of a special conversation of sorts because I've been thinking of doing conversations, having conversations with people beyond filmmaking. You know, not exactly writers, not exactly directors, but people who beyond filmmaking. And this is like our first episode of sorts. And I'm glad to have Mukesh Manjunath. He's the writer of this book called The Age of Heroes. You have to check it out. It's an academic book, but it's also very, very joyful. I think it gets the balance really, really perfect. So I'm glad to have Mukesh with me. Hi, Mukesh.
So nice to meet you. Like
with
this
cameras,
and do
weirdly.
this.
It feels weird actually.
Yeah.
Normally we are sitting in cafes and restaurants bitching about others.
Yeah.
This time we have cameras. So, man, I wanted to know.
So we'll pitch on camera.
No, we won't. Why did you write this book?
Why did I write this book?
How would you describe this book for someone who hasn't read it, and why did you write it?
Okay, so I think to answer the first question, which is that this book is for people who love Telugu cinema, who've grown up watching Telugu cinema. If you ever felt like, hey, I have not read about that, say in English somewhere, it's about the people who love Telugu cinema. It's not exactly about the heroes per se. So the heroes of this book are the audience members. So I think it was about, okay, do I have an opportunity to talk about the people who watch this cinema, who grew up watching it, who are impacted by it, and most importantly, who've taken big life decisions because they saw something in a Telugu film, right? Because I think so people like us who sort of grown up watching Telugu cinema and then later discover other forms of cinema. I'm talking about whether it's Tamil cinema, Bollywood, and Hollywood, and whatever world cinema may be. I think we always hear about Telugu cinema as being on the slightly masala mainstream end of things, which I think removes some sort of a personal connection from it, as if it's just entertainment for the sake of entertainment. And I think for me, it was like, hey, but it's actually a little more than that, right? It's not just something, of course it's mindless, but it's also very personal. So I wanted to capture that, and I didn't feel like I read anything that captured that in English literature in India anywhere. And the other absence I found in sort of Indian literature, which is, I'm now getting into why I wrote this book, is that I feel like whenever you've read any form of Indian literature, right, both fiction and non-fiction, you'll read about histories and you'll read about kings and queens, or you'll read about Bombay's or Maximum City and then Delhi's and lanes and all of that. But what about like the smaller towns that we sort of grew up in, or
like
we've seen,
like you point out in the book?
I'm from there. So what about the smaller towns we grew up in? What about, like, they almost become this sort of amorphous blob that no one really talks about, or you have to be like a quirky village to become like some sort of an R.K. Narayan trope. So I was like, okay, I have these two things that I feel like have never been represented, which is that in general film conversations and literature, I always felt like Telugu cinema has been represented as this lightweight, masala, airy thing.
Not lightweight, heavyweight.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, nothing is light.
no, but I
nothing is
mean,
light about
I mean lightweight in terms of its impact, in terms of
Right.
how seriously it is talked about in cinema. But hey, but if it moves people as much as say some sort of an Iranian film or like a Separation does to some other person, like why can't both be on the same weight? Like how is the impact it has on someone like some person who probably only watches Telugu cinema? How is that impact any less than an Iranian film has on a cinephile? So that's one part of it. And the second part of it comes from being like, hey, the places that I sort of grew up in, I don't think I ever saw them being written about in, of course, they were written, maybe if they were mentioned, they were written in this rustic manner. But they were also goofy places. They were also romantic places. They were also places where silly things happened. There were lives lived there that weren't just about the big, broad political movements or whatever. So I think somewhere between these two thoughts is like, and if you want to see, and if you're a Telugu speaking English speaking Telugu person, sorry, and you've grown up watching Telugu cinema, I feel like you would really love this book. You would feel a part of you being represented that you probably wouldn't get in other forms in Indian literature.
See, one of the things that I really love about this book is that there is this really condescending perspective towards Telugu cinema, not just from non-Telugu people, from Telugu people
Yeah.
themselves. Like I've heard like members of my own family look down on Telugu cinema,
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that, oh, why are you watching like Gemini? Why can't you watch something on Star Movies? Let's watch Inspector Gadget. Let's watch
Yeah.
Tremors. I get all of that. When did you realize that Telugu cinema is being looked down upon? At what point in your life?
I think it's actually not just Telugu cinema, just Telugu as a whole was looked down upon because
As a culture, you mean?
No, I'll just give you an example. I think in school, I was told deliberately to not take Telugu. All right. I think that was the first time I realized, because that didn't happen with other friends who were doing other languages, right? The folks who spoke Hindi were taking Hindi. The folks who spoke Tamil, I'm guessing when you later meet them
Yeah.
in your teens or whatever, they've always taken Tamil. But somehow, I was always told, and so was the rest of my family, that hey, don't take Telugu because anyway we speak it at home. So it's like, get one extra language for the same amount of school fees that you're paying. So I think that was the first time you felt like, okay, this itself, the language itself was looked down upon. And second, of course, I think because Telugu cinema itself was such a bad habit. It was one of the bad habits.
Cinema itself is a bad habit.
Exactly.
Telugu
Cinema
was
itself
considered
is a worse habit.
Yeah.
Right? But while everybody still actively took part in it, right? It was still a bad habit that it is like a smoker telling you don't smoke. Right?
Like guilty pleasure. People call it, there is this idea of guilty pleasure, right? In movies. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like if you like a movie, you like it. Why do you have to feel guilty about it?
Exactly. So I think worse, which is that not just guilty, it's like a sin. Right? It's beyond a level of guilt, right? It's like you're committing a sin. Yeah, it's like you're committing a sin while watching a movie, especially if you're a child, right? So I think the minute you were told that don't take this language, so then I think the act of rebellion was to be like, now watch me, especially as you enter your teen years, you're like, the act of rebellion is watch me take Telugu as a subject, watch more movies, right? And I grew up in a boarding school where there were a bunch of people from different walks of life. So I think obviously when you meet different people and you're like, oh, the way your films are being talked about itself is like, oh, that's garbage, right? And so weirdly, I've always found this slightly weird, which is that I was in a boarding school for about 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Every weekend we were shown one movie, right? Obviously some bacha movie, whatever, right? At different ages, different movies. But in those 9 years, I was never shown a Telugu film.
Where was this boarding school? The Telugu states or outside?
It's in the Telugu states.
Okay.
It's in the Telugu states, and not once did they show one Telugu movie. And I was like, I was sometimes surprised that, hey, how can there be not one thing how can there not be one movie that you think is worth showing? And then I think it just becomes like an act of rebellion to do it. So I think that's how it just became a broader idea of, okay, why, like, an act of rebellion leads to you asking some questions to yourself, like, okay, but why can't I do this, and why can't I do this, and why can't I write? And then like, okay, now watch me write a book, and then talk about the people who actually took it seriously along the way and who helped me who didn't make it feel like it was also sin. Right? I think so. The book is also a tribute to such people that said, hey, you can do this. You're not abnormal. Yeah.
Interesting. No, that boarding school thing is kind of surprising.
Right? And weirdly, like we saw, it's not like we didn't see Indian language. We saw Tamil films, we saw Marathi films, we saw, I don't know, things that were not located to that culture itself. I'm always seeing a Brazilian movie, like of course kids movie types, but obviously it was like a little like, hey, how come the place we're from and where, how can there not be one movie that is like worth showing?
Another lovely facet about this book is like how personal it is.
Yeah.
Like you talk about being at your one of your grandmother's funeral, and this cousin comes to you and he asks you, Mahesh Babu cinema ki veldamma.
Yeah.
Okay, like it only tells that cinema has been so tightly, so ingrained
Yeah.
in our lives, right? At what point did you realize, at what point did you start seeing that cinema is not just like a source of entertainment, but it has been, a major part of our lives, and it's influencing us. It's dictating some of the choices that we make. Like Mukesh, I know a guy who came into journalism after watching Co, which is like the Tamil version of Rangam. I know a guy who took up journalism after seeing that movie.
Yeah.
Now he kind of regrets it because that movie made journalism look all cooling, and journalism is not at all cool. So at what point did you start seeing this marriage between culture, life, and cinema?
So I'll tell you one personal thing, like as in like the one like personal as in the thing I did because of this, which I think I talk about in the book also, which is that I think in 6th standard I was getting horrible marks in Hindi. Right, I was terrible at Hindi. And just then, I think that summer before, Simhadri had released. And in the climax, there are these dialogues about being Telugu and all of that. And I was so inspired by that, I said, I'm going to leave Hindi and I'm going to take up Telugu as a subject. So I think in terms of my own life, that was the first thing I did very solidly, where it actually changed the course of my life. In terms of, in school, that changes, right? Because it later became, because I did well in Telugu and I think it pushed up my board marks average, which got me a little more respect in my house. So I was like, okay, the one thing that I did because I've watched a film actually made my life for the better. So I think that's the first thing that I did in my life. I think in terms of where I observed how personal it is was, I think, my grandmom, and I think I could see her be influenced by every movie she saw, for both good and bad.
Okay.
Right?
Like what's a good thing and what's a bad?
Like girls should be educated. I'm sure. I remember her encouraging one of, like, say, family members to study because I'm like, that's something she saw in a movie. Right, because not only something that's something she lacked in her life, that she saw that, okay, in a movie, if this happens, it's much better. So that's a value that she picked up from a movie.
Oh, lovely.
And of course, a little bit of chauvinism, not a little bit, I'm sure there's a lot of chauvinism in the movies of the late 90s, early 2000s that we grew up in. I'm not even talking about what happened before. Some of that still retained, whether it's early marriage and the kind of clothes that you should wear and the kind of values you believe in. I think for sure that was definitely something that she still retained. I'm saying these are just broad light examples. I'm sure they're much deeper.
Yeah.
So that because that was the first person who I saw movies with, my grandmom, because it was like two ends of the age spectrum, right? Like the 60-year-old and the 6-year-old, and they're like the most. Nobody wants to hang out with them in a family. So I think as the two outcasts in the family, because 6-year-olds are really annoying. I'm sure
they are.
Yeah, 6-year-olds are very annoying. I'm sure.
I think 10 is where I...
And about 60 years old is also when old people start losing their minds. So I think everybody in between who's either trying to run a family, people who are 20 to 40 are like, okay, can we just avoid these people? So I think naturally my grandmother and I formed a partnership. I think about for 3-4 years, we were watching a movie, like I think 2-3 movies every week.
Oh, in theaters?
In theaters.
Wow.
And it's great for her because like I was so small, she didn't have to pay tickets for me, or like she could just sneak me in, and by the time you're a regular in a theater, you know the guy and you're like, okay. So I was just an extra thing that, okay, if I leave, I can't leave him at home and no one wants to hang out with this 6-year-old. So like, okay, let's take him to a theater and chill. So obviously some movies I would sleep through and some movies I'd watch through, but I think I could clearly see that it's like Prodhunapu Chesi Santram Cinema Kale. Like it became something that bookends the day for her. Right? Because again, there was not much for her to do. And there's not much for me to do. So I think that's how it became an active part. So and what I'm trying to say is that made it much easier for me to see it as a very personal event, right? Because it had I associated with the warmth of a grandmother very early on, as opposed to like something that like I know a lot of friends who used to sneak out with their friends and watch a movie, which I also did later on. But I think early on, because I just saw it as something that my grandmother and I did, to me, it has always been something very warm. So I think at that early age, cinema became a very personal thing, but not. I didn't believe the world when it told me it was illegal, because I'm like, hey, I saw it with my grandmom. How can it be illegal, right? So yeah, that's how I think my perspective was shaped on, hey, Telugu movies aren't that bad to write about.
See, I really love the angle that you take with your grandmother in this book. Like, you went to watch Okkadu with her after having Uggani Bhaji. And it makes me so happy that she is the one who said, let's watch the film in Kurnool. Because the film has like a major event taking place in Kurnool. Please tell me about that, and obviously more about your grandmother. I would love to listen about it.
So firstly, I think I'll just tell you about one singular experience, which is that obviously because I was in a boarding school, only summers and winters, whatever, Dasra holidays and summer holidays, so the only time you actually saw movies. So you're catching up on everything you missed for a couple of months, right? So I think, obviously because my grandmother and I had that relationship, it was something that it became a nice thing that we did. It became a ritual. So the idea is to make it as big as possible, right? And if you're trying to make it as big as possible at that age, at that time, the best thing is to, like, it's like very few of us, let's say we watched Harry Potter in London or something, like very few people get that. For us, this is that trip, right? It's about watching a film in the place. Very few people get that opportunity, right? So I think it became like this celebration for both of us, that because only both of us took it that seriously. Everyone else is
not everyone takes it that seriously.
And to have an adult who's so like into it, I think generally helped. And I think for her to have someone who's so enthusiastic also helped, right? And I think that's why it was a really nice thing, and to make an experience out of it. I think because she was so committed to making a memory out of it rather than just a way to kill time. I think again you start adding the layer of cinema is it's not just a random thing, but it's a memory, it's an experience that you associate with someone, with a place or a time and a moment that you capture in your life. So, which is why if you tell people about Okkadu, it's like, okay, it's a nice film, it's a masala film, all of that, and it's a great film. But it becomes something a little more. It's also the time you went with your grandmother so seriously that you went and watched it in Kurnool after having that spice. And it's also, you see, it's an epochal moment in, say, Telugu cinema history, because it's like a star was born that day. But it's also an epochal moment in not just my personal life, but I'm sure many people's personal lives who came that day, right? Who saw it, who came with their families, and who went with their grandmother, and who probably came with their friend, and who probably came with their crush. And all those stories, you probably never hear about them, right? Other than in anecdotes and conversations. So I thought it'll be nice to sort of codify it. Now, regarding my grandmom, I think when she grew up, the first movie she ever saw was Patalavari, and she, like if we think movies magic now, I can't even imagine how magical a movie would have felt, say, 50, 60, 70 years ago now, sorry. Right? Like a man moving on screen and dialogues, and like you're transported into a different world. And so that movie, I think, I don't even say change, it just affected, like it rewired the brain chemistry in my grandmother. And I think it just stuck with her because she was also young. I think she was about 15, 16. Maybe she was lying about her age. Because why would she be any different? Maybe she was lying about her age. But yeah, so she also saw it, and it changed her life apparently. Like every line, every dialogue, and of course you have a crush on NTR and that's not even a thing as a girl she was allowed to have, right? So that was almost her first secret. So she saw it, I think, in Guntur, from what she told me. And again, it just, because like not only was it her first, again, it was not just about a star being born that day, but it was her sneaking out in the middle of the day.
It's a core memory for her.
Yeah, it's a core memory for her. She sneaked out in the middle of the day, right? And back then theaters would be people smoking bidis and people selling small snacks. That itself was such an incredible experience for her that she never got to see. Like as a girl, she was obviously told to be, her geography that she could operate in was restricted. So for the first time, she literally went out of her way to watch a film, but also she was transported into a geography that she could probably not afford, both economically and in terms of the restrictions that were imposed on her by her parents. Right? And then to come back and to reenact the film, and then to take her brothers, and all of that just becomes, a core way of living. And I think, I don't know if you've seen this with the people around you, but I've definitely seen this with the people around me. Cinemas influence them so much, they almost behave as if a camera is watching them at all times.
Okay, I haven't. Yeah.
A lot of people I know behave like that. They're almost like performing to a camera, and I think somehow it just changed her life to that. It just became like you're living life to a camera. So I think it rewired her like that almost. So which I think I really enjoyed, probably I realized that much later, but to me, I'm like watching this incredible woman love and fight with the family into taking me into films. And which is nice because someone else is fighting your battles for you, and someone who most people do not want to say no to, because I guess it's just very hard to say no to old people.
Yeah.
So then I was the good collateral damage. What's your word? Collateral beneficiary of that.
Lovely, man. Lovely. I knew that there's this weird connection between you and me. I was in 2019 YCL, and they like this book was granted by
Yes.
funding.
Yeah.
What exactly is the process? Because I heard your name, and then like some 4 years later, I see that this book is a reality that I can hold in my hand now.
Nice.
How did it happen?
So I was working. Actually, I was working in Mumbai then, and then there was in 2019 Mami, that Mumbai film moving. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah,
Mami,
okay.
the Mami Film Festival, and HarperCollins tied up, and then they did. They were there. Their idea was that okay, till now we've been rewarding guys who already written books on cinema, but let's get new people to write about cinema. So they had just had a broad theme that said you can write about any film, and it was in partnership with HarperCollins and Mami. So then you had to send a bunch of things like whatever the pitching process, right? Which is you send a book synopsis, book summary about the author, and a sample chapter, and like a clear chapterization of the book. So I sent through all that, and it was nice because I was underconfident about winning it. So there was a competition across India. There would have been some X number of entries, and because it was in Bombay, and I had written primarily about a Telugu book about Telugu cinema. And then even the sample chapter I sent wasn't like an intro to Telugu cinema. It was more about the chapter on Vijay Shanti, which is a very niche chapter, right? So I sent that not really thinking that it will get made, but I thought, okay, no, maybe it's a book that I write for myself, and then see how long it takes to get written, and then you see what the journey with it is. But luckily, it got selected, and then they granted, and then it took me about 1.5 to 2 years to write the book, and then COVID happened, and then about a year to edit it and print it and make it like a real tangible thing.
What was writing process like? Like how would you like commit yourself to writing? Like would you like say like 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day? I want to know like
okay, so the first thing was the chapterization had to be solid. The idea said okay, I think usually in life I'm not this structured about anything. Right? Even coming to the interview, I was like, oh my god, I planned it so badly. But I think for this somehow some divine intervention, I guess, which is that I was actually very structured about this. Like it was almost like I felt like some spirit came into me and then like made me operate it in a different way, which is because so I wrote a 3-line summary of the book, then a 1-pager for the book for myself, right? Then I wrote a 2.5-page summary about the book. Like what is it that I want to write, right? So for me, my first 3 lines I remember was that, okay, why are the people from the Telugu states obsessed about their film stars? And why do these film stars end up becoming politicians? So I know that became my mantra for the book, that pretty much every chapter and every page had to somehow answer that question. One of the 2 questions, that why do people love these stars and why do they become politicians? Right? And
why was that politician angle so important for you?
Because it's something that I found a little unique, because we almost take it for granted. We're never surprised if an actor becomes a politician.
Like it's normalized.
It's normalized. It's in fact, to become a star is almost halfway mark, right? The journey for a lot of them, I'm talking about main actors, stars, supporting stars, the journey only gets completed, it feels complete when you're becoming some sort of a social worker or a reformer types, or like a political associated with a political party actively, right? And I think it's also because these were the only public figures we had. I think you and I have spoken a lot about this, about how the Telugu states primarily have only film stars and film associated people as en masse public figures that everyone speaks about. So it just became normalized that for us it's normal that they became leaders, but I do think it's a curious phenomenon that's worth writing about. So that's why it became, this is the central academic question I wanted to answer. But I think the one thing I was very sure about was that I was not going to write it like an academic book.
Right.
That ultimately this is in fact, I wrote a draft of the first chapter in a very dry academic way, that it's tracing out the history like just 3 levels above Wikipedia, right? Just like a tracing out. But I think it was exactly that. It was so dry that I'm like, the whole joy of Telugu cinema is very personal, right? It's about sitting in a theater, it's about watching with people you love, and it's about discussing it for hours on end afterwards, right? And the joy isn't discussing it. It doesn't have to fall into the grammar of traditional cinema appreciation, right? We have our own way of appreciating. We have our own joys that we derive from it. And so much of it is meta, so much of it is, it's stuff that you have to pick up because you're born into a culture, you know certain piece of information, which is why a meta action that a character does or meta dialogue that an actor does, only we'll get it, which will contribute to ticket sales, which will make it a bigger hit, but which someone's outside, they will not get it, right? So I knew for a fact that this book, I'm not saying all books that delve into this topic, but this book for me had to be incredibly personal, which means it had to be incredibly vulnerable about.
I mean, you put a lot of yourself out there. Yeah.
The other place that this thought came from was that in my college, I did a humanities degree. And a lot of humanities writing is very dry and academic, and it's written for people who are either other humanities students or who want to pretend they're humanities students. So I didn't want that. Like for me, it's like a Telugu film, man. Like how can you write about Telugu film and not be like, I want to write to as many people as possible who can read in English, right? It seems almost antithetical to be like, oh, I want to write it for a niche group. Like it just didn't make sense to me. So, and I think one of the first things that I say also in the book is that if you know Telugu cinema, this book is for you. If you don't know Telugu cinema, also this book is for you. So, because that's what Telugu cinema is for me, which is that it's something for everybody. So, from these two strains of thought, so I had the central question, which is that, okay, why do these people love their film stars and why do these film stars become politicians? And then the soul would be very personal. So then I was like, I wrote that. Then the chapterization was still very impersonal. But when I wrote, so the chapterization took me about a week and a half to 2 weeks. Because that took about 2-3 hours of writing every day, and you're reading up, etc. And then the sample chapter was the first one I wrote, which was the Vijay Shanti chapter, right? And that chapter took a while. It took about a month and a half and it was actually the shortest chapter, which I later expanded into a little more because there's more to write. But because you're setting the tone for yourself, right? You don't know what it is until you write it. So I didn't know what it was. So I'm figuring out the texture of the book as I write it. Because the chapterization is impersonal. Because the book should work without the funny stories, right? The book should work without the soul in terms of its argument. Then everything else is like what makes it delicious, right? It's the meat. It's what you're looking forward to. But at its core, it should still work. So I knew in that chapter, I was like, hey, there is a hero, a masculine female hero, and what does that mean? How did that shape people? How did that impact people? How did that impact the state? How did that impact someone? And most importantly, how did that impact my life? And that's the meat. And it's so that, of course, there is an inherent narcissism in writing that, but it's also because someone else, like say if you're reading it, you should also have a memory that you have with the movie or that person or that star that needs to be triggered, right? If it's impersonal, it won't trigger anything for you. Yeah. But if I'm able to be vulnerable, I think you would also be, you as in the reader would also be vulnerable with themselves and trigger that memory, just smile a little. And I wanted to be that guy. While you're reading, I want to make you smile and I want to make you think about, I remember that time I saw that film. I remember that time I saw with my friend or my baba or someone, whoever you saw. I remember that time I hated that film. Or, a lot of times people see family with joint families, right? And it's like the 3 hours where your family doesn't hate each other. So I wanted to get that moment away.
Wow. Yeah. See, this book, this book captures that vibe, right? I think you even mentioned this in the book where you're sitting and talking to one of your friends in Bombay.
Yeah.
Bombay, and he's like, how do you guys enjoy these movies? And you're, because they are so illogical or because the fights are so gravity defying. And you're like, yeah, but I know that it's a contract between me and the film.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when people say, oh, it's so silly and it's gravity defying, yeah, I think to me that never made sense. And probably to you when you first heard it, but who's expecting that? Right.
I think that's also a very unique Telugu thing.
Yeah.
Like only Telugu audience, we are like, of course, it's a Telugu film. It's okay.
It's a film. It's yeah. No one is coming here expecting logics, right? I don't know. I think to use logic as a meter to measure a story is very stupid, right? And also, especially when we grew up with a lot of folk tales, right, and oral histories. We grew up with a lot of oral histories around us, right? Even the way we tell our epics to each other, it's very oral. We don't really sit and read We're not a culture that sits and read Mahabharata, all of that, right? We just told these stories, and it's full of exaggerations, and no one is, because ultimately we are able to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? We're able to be like, this is the entertainment, and that's the thing that its core argument, and we're able to see a character, the character's growth and their defining characteristics. And I'm not saying everything is forgivable and everything is whatever, but I think the logic-defying aspect of it is not something that even bothers us.
Not a deal breaker.
It's not a deal breaker at all. In fact, it's a deal sealer. There's too much logic also. It's like, bro, make it fun for me, have fun with it. So yeah, and I think it comes from the fact that we're all oral storytellers. Like, I know I've written a book, but I think we're all being like, oh bro, I need to tell you something. We love telling each other anecdotes or whatever. So, and they're full of exaggerations. Like, who tells an anecdote as is?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So who's going to tell a story as is? That's the most stupid form of telling a story. So in fact, I would actually be like, oh, that realism is actually stupid. Like,
it's boring.
Like, he walked, that's it. You're going to tell me he walked?
It's factual. There's no story there.
So I think so to us it's silly that things have logic actually.
Then what is a deal breaker for you in cinema? Because you're also a critic, right? What is a deal breaker for you? What is non-negotiable for you in a film? Or say, let's keep it like specific to Telugu.
Okay, no. I think actually what I hate in general, not just Telugu, but I guess more so in Telugu. And I'd never watched, and luckily I don't think Telugu films have been corrupted by that, or Telugu culture has ever been corrupted by that, which is that, I'm speaking abstract terms, which is that I hate cultural elitism and I hate intellectual elitism that seeps in.
Like, define these terms.
Okay, no,
like I'm a 5-year-old.
Chapta.
Yeah. I know those who are not aware.
So I think the minute you try to make good culture and bad culture, that ilanti which chestane it's good and ilanti which chestane it's bad. Now, not everything is defensible. Of course, the things that are the illegal and indefensible are obviously I'm talking about that. Hey, this. So when you say only films from a certain region is actually good cinema, or only films from a certain region is bad cinema, then I feel like that's I don't appreciate that at all, right? Or only films by these set of filmmakers that follow these set of story logics are actual cinema, actual storytelling. And when there's like a small group of people that try to control what it should be and what it shouldn't be, which is not just the framework of storytelling, but also the framework of appreciation, right? That I think is dangerous for me. Because then, like I said, it's what happens that then it's the way that people who enjoy films a certain way.
Like, do you mind giving an example?
Okay, I feel a lot of film associated people, forget filmmakers, are very embarrassed by Indian films at some level, right? There seems to be like, especially the films that we grew up with, there seems to be some sort of shame associated with it. Oh, we have to be, of course, you have to be better in terms of say craft and all of that, but there's always a shame associated with the films that we grew up with. Does that make sense? Whether it's 90s, right? But actually, that film was, and because you have superior craft today, and by superior craft, like a lot of times it's just about where you place the camera, right? It's like camera, it's so good, right? I'm just like, but where is the joy in telling the story, right? It's like, of course, you're packaging it well, but so that's one form of it. The second form is like film appreciation. I feel like when it gets too hyper intellectualized, or no, I don't think the word intellectual should be cornered by a certain set of people, right? I feel like, hey, if you're the sort of person who's like the way a person emotionally reacts to a film, that to me is film appreciation, right? How much does it impact your story, right? And I don't think one person's reaction is lesser than another person. I think it should be a very equal, even democratic space that, okay, just because a film critic reacted a certain way, I don't think that reaction becomes much better than a person who's just bellowing his guts out in a film.
It can't be extrapolated. It doesn't work like that.
So something like that. I do feel like there's a certain intellectual elitism that comes with films, which I'm not a big fan of. I'm not saying it's wrong.
You don't have to hesitate. There is like a major section.
There is, right? And I think films and stories are almost like joy-creating machines. Like, why would you? And I'm not just talking about there have to be happy endings. I think people again will take it. If I give an argument, then people will take it to the other extreme and be like, sink that straw man. But that's what I'm trying to say. That I'm trying to say that each person's reaction is as valid. And of course, if you say that people are reacting violently or abusively, that's obviously wrong. You're not defending any of that. But each person's joy is as is as serious as someone who's negatively reacting to it because they have some intellectual disagreements with the way storytelling structure is presented. Chapana, answer Chapana.
Yeah. See,
Because the reason I'm asking is I feel like I'm also framing and articulating it.
I get it. See, I see a lot of young filmmakers. Again, I'm not, what do you call this? It's not like targeting or anything. I'm not calling. No, generally, ఏ సినిమాలు చూసి పెరిగారు? Like, what are some of your most influential films? When I ask them, what are some of your most influential filmmakers? Not everybody names a Puri Jagannath or an SS. Now people are naming SS Rajamouli because SS Rajamouli has been like internationally validated. So now they are saying SS Rajamouli. I don't think people were naming SS Rajamouli up until like some 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Like till date, nobody, like very few people say that I came into films because of Puri Jagannath.
Yeah.
I came into films because of after watching V.V. Vinayak. Nobody says that. Everybody draws the line at RGV. No. K. Vishwanath, Jandyala, obviously they are legends.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, come on, guys. Like,
but it's also a certain safety you ascribe with the past, right? Once it's in the past, you're like, okay, now I can pick from that because it's like a safe. It becomes an intellectual answer to say. It becomes like an intellectual performance that you can give, as if to say that
it might be fair. It might be valid. Yeah. They might have been tremendously influenced by somebody like a K. Vishwanath, but I'm saying it's all valid. Like, I'm not here to, I can't dictate what one person can be influenced.
Yeah, now we can't go the other extreme of saying because you picked that your shit.
Yeah, like I've never heard anyone say, like maybe now somebody might post some clip of a filmmaker saying that look at this person has cited Puri Jagannath as an influence, but I don't see a lot of people ascribing their love to cinema to these commercial masala filmmakers,
and to me,
who kind of made my childhood.
Yeah, exactly, right. So a lot of people will be like, of course, we're for like, you know, liberal democratic values, it should be even, but some of them hate commercial cinema. I'm like, but commercial cinema is the one thing that's catering to everybody.
Like, you start with commercial cinema.
Yeah, like, no, I also love this aspect of Telugu cinema, and I think Hriday told me.
Oh, right. Commercial cinema is the most democratic cinema.
It is the most democratic. Because I think Hriday told me this, he articulated this for me, and I was like, oh, it stuck with me since then. But it's something that you would have sensed also. But he articulated the best, which is that Telugu cinema is the only one that's 100% catering to audience. Its singular goal is to entertain everybody who's come to the theatre. It's like that kid, and I think I was this kid in class, so I think I relate with it. It's that kid who just wants to sit at the back and say the funniest thing or say the most entertaining thing. And it's just doing it for a laugh. It's doing it to entertain and laugh, or it's doing it to entertain you, right? It's not, and I'm like, wow, that's so beautiful. There's nothing, in fact, there's nothing narcissistic about this. It might fail, it might be stupid, it might be against your values, etc. And those are fair criticisms, especially if it's against modern progressive values. But the fact that Telugu cinema is at its core is just singularly trying to entertain you. It's not trying to do anything else. Even the guys who want to give a message are like, first entertain JC, then we'll put the message at the end. Like, because it's just that. And I think that is something, and to me, that if someone can appreciate that, then you can't, how can you hate it?
Yeah.
How can you hate the kid who's saying the funniest thing in class?
Like, they're just trying to make you happy.
Yeah, and they might fail. Of course they will. Like,
they will. They do.
Yeah, they
from
do.
time to time. Most of the
time do. But I think I appreciate the ethic and ethos of, okay, I'm not here to talk about me that much. I'm here to, you've come here and I'm just going to entertain the crap out of you and throw whatever I have at you to make you smile, to make you laugh, to make you everything, right? And to walk back. That's it. And I think I appreciate that ethic in Telugu cinema a lot.
Absolutely. A couple of final questions. See, if you had to introduce Telugu cinema to someone, what would be your 5 picks to introduce someone?
If there is one person who has no clue that this film culture existed, I would always say Care of Kanjarapalam is a great start. Like, I think it's a great start because it's a very simple film to understand, but the impact it has, right? And I don't like people who say Care of Kanjarapalam is an art film. I think it's an extremely mainstream film. And I think it's beautiful that it's a mainstream film. Like, when I say it's a mainstream film, I think it's the highest praise I can afford it, that a film with pretty much no mainstream star became a mainstream film. It was so, like I think it shook me. I'm sure it shook everybody who saw it when they first saw it. So I would start with that. Then it's about then I would probably drop in a Mahanati and a Rangasthalam, because then you sort of get the ethos of the film, right? Because even on Care of Kanjarapalam punches, like with the hanging scene or the final reveal, it doesn't hold back. It's not subtle about that, and in a good way, right? It really makes you cry. So I would start with, then I would go to Mahanati, because I think that's that film, I think.
Mahanati.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a long time I didn't realize that Telugu film made such good love stories, like, you know, that impactful love stories. And at its core, I think more than a biopic, it's a love story actually, right? The biopic is it's nice to cream and cover, but it's at its core, it's a tragic. It's
love story.
Titanic actually, in a way. And then I would work, and so for me, it's about how many films can I get to Atadu.
Everything leads to Atadu. Atadu is where it ends.
Atadu is, for me, if I can take a person who's never watched a Telugu film, whether it's, so I always start with, I have a starting point, which is always Care of Cancer Problem. It's the first film I recommend to everybody who's ever talked to me about, oh yeah, I want to get in. Other than RRR, what is the thing that I should actually watch?
Okay, doubt.
Yeah.
Why can't Atadu be the starting point?
Because I do feel like to really appreciate it, you have to like, I think it's very hard to find it even funny without getting a certain trained and a certain ethos, right? It's
Okay.
like, I don't know. I've tried it. Maybe the sample size was small, but they're like, okay, what is the big deal in this? It's very
Really? You have recommended Atadu as the
first film, and it's been like
Okay.
little thanda. But I know people who, again, maybe my sample size are small, so I don't want to whatever. But I do think when I've worked people's way to there, you really get it. You get why, because if you look at it from a certain like traditional film analytical, like whatever, a traditional Western film appreciation gaze, it's like, oh, it takes a detour, it becomes some family drama. But I think that family drama is what we need.
Yeah.
Like, so there is that. Okay, this is why I feel like with the moment where Mahesh Babu says, "Illu inta baguntundante munde vachevani," I feel like to appreciate it. That's actually the most, like, it's the most. It's like a spy, which is like a Western influence. Or not a spy, an assassin, sorry. An assassin learning family sentiment. Bah!
How can you blend this?
Yeah, exactly. How can you blend this? But I think to really appreciate it, you need to work your way to that ethic, and then it's like, if you can, that's how I would work my way. Because you start with Care of Cancer Problem, which is like, it works to anybody even who doesn't. You don't have to really know the film culture to appreciate it, and then you slowly work. How many films can I place in between? And then one day, can I just show Atadu on a big screen and then be like, laugh?
Dude, to me, Atadu is the definitive Telugu masala film.
Yeah.
Okay, to me, that is it.
Yeah.
You tell me what is so special about Atadu from your perspective. I have my reasons.
First time yours. I feel like I've been talking about.
No, see, the first time I watched Atadu, I was too young. I think I was in the 3rd class or 4th standard. I really didn't like it. And I didn't know that the film was a big deal. I watched it. Yeah. I watched it in a theatre. I watched it in Chintal, which is massive 70mm screen, which right now feels like a privilege.
Yeah.
I didn't like it because of the detour. Okay. I felt like it was neither. Okay. I didn't know that I was getting the best of both worlds. I was like, what's wrong with this film? This film starts as an action film talking about a contract killer. It's talking about politics. I was too young. I'll ascribe it to my age also. The scene where Shiva Reddy plans plots his own assassination. Yeah. I didn't get it.
Oh.
I did not understand. I was too young. I'm like, what's happening? What the hell is the most enjoyable parts for me were obviously the Brahmanandam bits.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's slapstick.
And the dialogues are like fast.
Like the toothpaste. The way he's pressing the toothpaste.
The punch pretty much you keep missing also.
మన స్కూల్ బెంచ్ లాగా నాన్న చూడరా మన స్కూల్ బెంచ్ లాగా ఎంత గట్టిగా ఉందో. See, after some 3 years or some 4 years, I mean, like when I was some 10, by the time I think I must have been 10, in my early teens, I came to know that Atadu was a big deal. By the time I wasn't in Andhra or Hyderabad, I was outside. And Ma TV lo, they used to keep telecasting that film on and on and on and on. Atla, I watched that film so many times. And I'm like, dude, how is this film managing to be everything at once?
Yeah.
You see, it's everything. Like there is this assassin, like who literally stabs a guy and it tears his stomach apart.
And it's a setup from the first title credits sequence. Yeah.
And then it's the same film where you have a wedding song.
Yeah. And then end of the wedding song is a big reveal. Yeah. Like the reveal, right? Like,
so this balance, right? I realized that this film was doing so many things after a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then I started rewatching it. I find, see, people, you know, there are still those, they call that some scenes are plagiarized and all. Whatever it is, they nailed it.
Yeah, they nailed it. Yeah.
The music is so good. Mahesh Babu is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
The music, man. Even
Background music is incredible.
even the shots in that film, like when Pardu comes home, like when Nandu comes as Pardu for the first time, that kid
guitars from
there's this pan with the car, they have the car. That kid points out gun towards
to him.
Pardu. There is this low angle shot.
And that orange shirt and white, something that he's wearing, right? Oh,
I mean, you are pointing out a toy gun at an assassin. How cool is that? There are so many shots in that film, and it's also like the mask is so subtle.
That, I think it was that, right? It was yeah.
Okkadu, we had Okkadu, but this was like the mask.
But Okkadu, the villain itself was so hard. So the subtle was a contrast. But
the entire thing is subtle.
There's no villain actually. In a way, it's a suspense thriller, right? There's no villain per se. There's no ferocious villain. There's a betrayal and a twist at the end and all, but there's no ferocious villain. It's just tense. Oh, that's what I loved. Okay, so the reason I love Atharu, because I think, I'll also tell a personal story, because I think every film has a personal story, which is why I love it. So I didn't actually watch Atharu first when it came out. So we had gone for a trek. I was in 7th or 8th. And put trek but I think put it trek pitch, but must like some 4 floors or something. It was very short. But I was like a fat kid who couldn't climb it. So my friend was like, entertain me. He said, "Hey, forget it, we just climb and come." He said, "I can't do it, I'm going to sit here." So as we were climbing up, which took me 45 minutes, he narrated the whole of Atharu to me. To keep me entertained and forget this. Right? And he did such a beautiful job. And it's like the first great storyteller I met. Like he's starting and he told me the twist and everything. So, but that didn't do it, because he told it to me as in my head. I'm like, wow, I don't know if Trivikram also would have narrated it as well to Mahesh Babu that day, because he said it proper, and the expressions and the toothpaste. So to me, I have his entire narration in my head properly. So it became this moment between me and my friend, right? A Laksha Sinmalo, he has to climb the hill, right? So to me, it was like as I was climbing up that hill, I was just hearing Atharu's story, and then like that visiting card, everything.
That visiting card scene, man.
So that's one. So I think there's a specialness and fondness because there's a stamp of friendship associated with it, and like almost like metaphorical that I'm climbing a small, I put up at the hill, but now it's some small hill, but climbing it up or climbing that hill and all of that. And I think I would say it's incredible because it just blends so many genres, right? Like there's no outright villain. Right, and it starts off as I think it was so cool. Like I'm sure, did you also try imitating that escalator ride up with a?
Dude, I do it even now.
Yeah,
I go to Prasad's a lot. I still feel the same.
Yeah, like just holding that. I did it every time, and the elders in my family like feed because it was so impactful, right? So I think it's that blending of genres, right? And to me, actually, the most defining moment of the film is where he says, "Illinta baundante mundu vachevandi," because that's where I feel like the very Western idea of an assassin, and it culminates into this beautifully Telugu film moment, right? It's like that. That's the film. And to understand the depth of that moment, not just in terms of. Not in the film universe of a family and important, but in the film of how incredible a task it is to convincingly do it. You're not taking a leap of faith or logic anywhere. Emotional logic, I mean. You're slowly getting there, and at that moment, he has to say exactly that. It's so good. So I think that it really captures that for me. Yeah, sorry. I think Atharu, I can stop for hours.
Yeah. I can talk about each scene in Atharu.
Yeah.
There's so
many
great
jokes and punches and
there are so many cool montages in Pillagali where Mahesh Babu wears shorts and comes and Trisha looks at him objectifyingly. He goes and wears
and the way he eats dosa and they're doing some
they want to go to movie cinema. He comes and eat dosa like he doesn't give a so many great moments in Atharu. Let me quiz you.
Oh no!
What is Pardu eating when he tells that dialogue? Illante in the boundary. He's spinny or atta.
Yeah, she's feeding him.
No, they say what he's eating.
Avkaya.
Gongura
pachadi. Yeah, that's the most Telugu thing possible. Yeah, remember it being a pickle. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you so much.
I really loved this conversation, guys. Once again, please do check out The Age of Heroes. I think when this interview goes live, I'll do a giveaway once again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you
Hey,
so much.
thank you so much. It was so much fun, this
that time.
conversation.
Likewise.
And yeah, guys, buy this book. It's a great book. The author's a great guy. Buy it.
Thank you.
Taste Daily. Taste the Daily.
Holidays nale adi namma GT Holidays da. South India's #1 travel brand.